I think let's get it started. So first of all, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us on today's webinar, Demystifying the SOC. So it's hosted by us, Protos Network. I'm Damien, I'm the sales director here, and I'll be your host for today's session. So I can see, just looking in now, there's a lot of people joining us. We've got a lot of IT decision makers. We've got some leaders here as well. So thank you for joining, and hopefully we can help you understand a little bit more about security operations. Before we dive in, just a couple of housekeeping. Webinar is going to last approximately 60 minutes, might finish a bit earlier, depends how engaged you guys are and how many questions you throw to Darren and I. There will be the Q&A at the end. There is a Q&A box actually on the right hand side of the WebEx, so please make this as interactive as possible. Any questions you've got, please feel free to fire them in there. I'll try and not disrupt us too much in his flow, but if we've got a good question that's pertinent, we'll make sure it gets asked. If you have any technical difficulties or you can't hear anything, can't see anything, again, everything looks good our end, but we can't see what you're seeing, so just let us know. Again, just type it in the chat and that'd be great. Webinar is recorded, so this will be sent out and shared following the webinar. So let's get started. So it's a pleasure for me to introduce our event speaker today, Darren Kewley. So he's our technical director and head of security services and is everything SOC. So he's got extensive experience helping numbers of businesses improve their security posture from day zero all the way up and making sure they've got the appropriate kind of threat response in place. So we'll go through today's agenda and what Darren's going to cover. So basically, what's a SOC and what does it do? This is from threat detection all the way up to incident response. How a SOC prevents cyber attacks. Common SOC acronyms, it's a bit like word bingo out there at the moment. And Darren's going to kind of demystify some of those terms as well. And what's the business case for having a managed SOC? Do you need one? And what does it mean for your business? A little bit about us, just before we jump into that. So we're networks and security services specialists based in Chester. We've been going 8 years, and we've got 3 specialist services, if you like. We've got our 24/7 dedicated NOC and SOC, which is just on the other side of this wall. You can see some of the pictures there with all the screens. We've got a governance, risk and compliance team as well. So we do a lot in the Cyber Essentials Plus, ISO 27001. So we've got a lot of skilled engineers, pen testers, network services and security operations. So again, kind of all next door. And we've been going, like I say, 8 years, and we've helped thousands of customers across the UK in kind of all of those architectures. So that's enough about me. I think I've done the agenda before the agenda slide does. So if you want to skip over that, I'll fire it over to you to take it away.
Yeah, so thank you for stealing my thunder on the agenda slide then. So again, because he's already done that. So we'll dive straight in then, with what a SOC does. So a SOC, a Security Operations Center, its primary role is to detect and respond to cyber attacks. So whilst we want the SOC to prevent all attacks, it can't. Realistically, cyber defenders have to be lucky 100% of the time. The attackers only have to be lucky once. And obviously, organizations have different sized networks, different architectures, they use different systems. Some may have to, run with vulnerable systems for a while. And, some of the things I'll talk about, that has been the case where we've identified a risk for a customer, they couldn't mitigate it, and they got, they got an attack in the meantime. And that's why it's critical to, when you have a SOC there, that it's there to limit the damage from that attack. So even if the attack happens and gets past defenses, can we detect it, and then can we take the appropriate response actions, to mitigate that and lessen the damage from an attack there? But a SOC can also have other functions. So, a common one and one we do for some of our customers is vulnerability management. So, that'll be looking at all the vulnerabilities across their systems or running monthly scans or whatever that looks like. And then advising them, you've got, 500 vulnerabilities in your environment. 50 of these are high or critical, but of them, these are the 5 that you might want to patch this week because there are exploits out, that sort of stuff. SOCs also, organizations, especially larger organizations that like big internet service providers that I've worked for in the past, they might also have the management of network security systems there. So, a few places where I used to work, the SOC used to also manage the firewalls. In our case, we've obviously got the network team as well, and so we kind of do that. That is a bit of a USP for Protos in that we do that network security as well. The SOC will also do, architectural design and security engineering, sometimes things like that. And that's certainly, something we do ourselves. Designing designing a zero trust framework for customers, or designing their EDR rollout or whatever that looks like. It can also, you can have compliance-based SOCs or a SOC that is there to help with your compliance needs, and we'll cover that, later. But they'll also carry out compliance tasks. So, for example, our SOC, the whole organization is ISO 27001, and as part of that, we have objectives and tasks that we have to do every month. And the SOC do a lot of that for us internally, and we do it for some of our customers. And that might just be providing a report, on the alarm scene and things like that. But it might be doing things like backup restore tests, and things like that we need to do on a monthly basis to prove that. Or even querying for administrator accounts, in our environment, because we have to review administrator access, on a monthly basis. And that's all tied to our compliance. You may also then get specialist SOC activities. So, we are quite general with our client base. We range from healthcare organizations to solicitors, then to manufacturing clients. But you might have SOCs that are industrial and deal with OT, operational technology, and IoT, and very niche, for example, in the oil and gas sector there. But in the main, that's what a SOC does. It detects and responds to cyber attacks. And what does a SOC look like in terms of personnel? So I'll keep saying this throughout this entire webinar. No SOC or managed detection and response service is built the same. And, different cyber companies, organizations will have different ways of approaching it. But in the main, these are the types of skills that you might see in the SOC, or the SOC might have roots into. So, at your initial layer, you have your SOC analysts. So these are the people who, an alarm comes in, they will triage that alarm and say, do I think this needs looking into further? Is this legitimate activity? Is this a false positive? Can we close this off? And you'll have different levels. You'll have you may hear of a level 1 SOC analyst who will just triage it and then pass it up to a level 2, who might do a bit more investigation, and then level 3 might be a bit more of a specialist, in malware analysis or something along those lines. You then have your security engineers. So these may build the SOC. They might tweak some of the things. They may work on automation flows, and automating response actions and things like that, working in EDR tools and constantly making the SOC better. In our case, some of our analysts are very good engineers as well. So they'll go into things like CrowdStrike and do some kind of automation flows, and they'll be working on that stuff in the background. You might have threat hunters. And again, these can be condensed. SOC analysts will do threat hunting as well. But if you're in a big, massive SOC, if in the defense industry where I used to work or something like that, you might have a dedicated threat hunter who's going and analyzing threat intelligence feeds and things like that, and then querying your environment for those threats, on a daily basis, trying to keep ahead of things. Kind of linked to that, you might have threat intelligence analysts. Certainly in specialist industries such as government and people like that, you will have that dedicated analysts. incident responders, most analysts and engineers are educated, in incident response. But you might want incident response specialists, and in our case, we do incident response all the time. We've done it, but and we will do it 99% of the time. But we've also got retainers, with one of our vendors for that wider incident response. So, for example, if Microsoft 365 was suffering a global attack, all of our customers are on Microsoft 365. We might need to pull that in. You'll also have compliance experts, quite often, and we've certainly got them here, from ISO Cyber Essentials, pen testers, things like that. Forensic analysts and forensic specialists, it's a bit of a dark art sometimes, how to take a forensic snapshot of a machine and analyze it and things like that. Again, we can do that. We've got those skills, we've got those playbooks here, but we've got partner companies who are, all ex-policemen, and, where we need that more dedicated stuff and a crime may have been committed, we can do that. But also in a lot of cases, our customers will have cyber insurance that provide that anyway. And we'll have all of that forensic data to give them, and then they can go and do that, And then you might have SOC managers, SOC leaders, and people like that. So, they're just a range of skills. You might have more detailed things, as I said earlier, industrial SOC personnel and things like that within the SOC. And what does a SOC do in the real world? So what I've got here is just 3 examples from the past couple of years of things that we've seen in our SOC. And I know some of these incidents, will be commonplace in other SOCs as well, of how having a SOC has helped and, what we actually do in that. So the first one was from a manufacturing customer, and this was, I think it was mid last year. They have had an endless problem that we're trying to work with them on the, their initial preparation for a cyber attack phase of their OT engineers and their industrial engineers having local admin rights on machines, for on their manufacturing lines and things like that, to download stuff and install software. So did an apparently safe bit of software. Now, the actual manufacturer of one of their systems had sent them a link for this. He downloaded it. And initially, the minute he executed that file, it started launching a whole heap of other processes. And started downloading other files. One of them was a ransomware encryptor. It downloaded, started executing and calling out. So obviously, in that instance, it got past some of their security. And it was actually CrowdStrike EDR that they had on the machine that obviously started detecting and blocking things. Alerted us straight away because they had the full EDR, where we can take actions and then jump in, and I'll cover what that is shortly. We isolated that device and then carried out a full forensic investigation and incident response plan, and that's the picture you can see there is actually CrowdStrike and where how quickly we can do that from our systems. The second one I want to bring up is sort of related. Sorry, that's not. That coming through? There we go. Can you see that, Damien? Yeah, Nationwide Charity. Yeah. Okay. So the second one's a Nationwide Charity, and this was a few years ago. But the reason I want to pull this up is they didn't have the full EDR, so we had to deal with this in a different way. So some of you may remember a few years ago there was if you had Exchange servers with Outlook web application open, OWA, they were exploited by 0-day. It was called a Hafnium attack. And they were putting web shells onto the Outlook and then executing commands. So in this instance, our customer, they had been patching and they thought they'd patched. Overnight, Microsoft had launched an emergency patch that wasn't seen, and then it was about 7 a.m. the next morning, and we detected that a web shell had been installed on their OWA. So we detected that, and instantly we didn't necessarily have the EDR there, and the reason being they just renewed their antivirus contract with their previous supplier. Now they had the antivirus, but they didn't have the ability in their licensing to isolate that device. Again, it's something we identified with them that they need to look at, but obviously budgets and risk and things like that, they kind of said, well, we're going to get rid of this service soon. we kind of, we will look at this, but, we've just spent quite a bit of money renewing that. But what we did have is we had, automation and XDR capability to push a firewall rule. So what we did, their OWA in that sense was only really open for mobiles because they were moving mostly into Microsoft 365. So we just instantly launched a firewall rule and blocked all access to the Exchange server whilst we carried out that full incident response. So that's another way to go. Now, the next one is a 24/7 call handling organization, and call center. And this is quite a recent one. So, mass phishing attack. It got past their email filters. I won't say which email filter they were using, but it's what, these old traditional email gateways, they are letting a lot through now. So it got through and it landed in hundreds of mailboxes. Now, what this aimed to do, and some of you, certainly would have seen this, it was a Microsoft 365 session stealing attack. So it tries to trick the users into going to it is actually a legitimate login page from Microsoft, but it's proxying through an attacker's infrastructure. It's called an adversary in the middle attack. And they steal a session token and can then log in, and this gets around multi-factor authentication. So it's a very common and worrying attack for a lot of the IT people that we speak with, because it's, it can be hard to block. But the systems we've got integrated with Microsoft XDR can identify that. So obviously we identified it. Important for us, we knew which accounts had clicked on the links and gone through. So we were instantly able to launch a response action to lock out those compromised accounts that were there. But then we then pivot for that customer into Microsoft, run a script just to delete all the emails for the users that had got it. So that's, what we're doing there. And you can see in all three of these, just to say that last one, they ripped that email security solution out quite quickly after that and invested in a newer solution. But what you can see in all of them is the SOC has had to take rapid response actions. And if these organizations didn't have a SOC or didn't have, EDR in place and things like that, these attacks could have been much worse for them. And what I'll cover now is I just pulled off some statistics from the last 90 days, in our SOC. So these actually a bit down because of Christmas. So over Christmas for us, things do get quieter, but when we have an incident over Christmas, it usually is a bit more legitimate. It is something. I often do Christmas Eve into Christmas Day. I cover that shift for the guys. And last year, a couple of accounts that have been compromised, they actually launched the attack at about 10:30 on Christmas Eve, thinking that there'd be no monitoring. Luckily there was, and we could take that response action, but we do see that. So we saw just under 2,000 alarms. Now that might seem like a lot, but actually it's not really. There's many more alarms that'll be happening, but they're suppressed because my team are constantly tuning out the noise. But we still get a lot of noise because, as you can see there, of those, 45 were actually true positives and incidents that we then needed to go and look at. But this is across, I think, 10 to 15,000 endpoints, that we're monitoring across that. And of those, 2 were critical and they required a full incident response. So as you can see, that's an incident every 2 days, let's say, which is about right. And how does that fall? In terms of delivery and things like that. So of those, 19 were system compromised, and that's things like malware, potentially unwanted software installed, and a couple of them actually were threat intelligence linked. So the threat intelligence, threat hunting identified network traffic that we weren't comfortable with, and it was something suspicious on a user machine that we then had to wipe and restore and things like that. But I will say the majority of them cases, it was blocked, and it didn't really fall into a wider risk. 16 of them were environmental awareness, and this is things within the environment that our system spotted that we're not quite sure about. So this is people setting up strange forwarders. it's setting up a scheduled task. It's something like that within the environment that doesn't quite look right, that we then need to jump in and go, hang on, what's going on here? And certainly that was, I know a few of you today said about insider threats, detecting that people were forwarding all of their work emails to the Yahoo account or a personal account. We had that a few times. And in one case, someone forwarded into their new role that the organization didn't know they have. So, data protection issues there that then we had to pass to their HR team, and that's for them to deal with. The 9 there, the delivery and attack, they're the ones for us that were mainly, the big concern there. And I think that not both of them, but one of them was one of these critical incidents. And that's where, sessions have been compromised, or, MFA hasn't been enabled on an account and they've got in and then spread. And they're the real ones inside there, account compromise and things like that. So, there, I know the malware and the system compromise makes a bigger chunk of that. But the ones that are the biggest headache for us in the SOC, and, the ones that we spend our most of our time doing response on is that. And then the one there, instant recon and probing, that was brute force against a VPN for a client. Now, we get that all the time. There will be loads of incidents that's a known issue, and they've got other protections that are blocking it, because VPNs and things like that are being brute force attacked all the time. In this instance, we had to look a bit further because it was legitimate usernames from that organization that were being brute forced. So that wasn't a bot doing that. That was someone organized who'd done open source intelligence and was trying valid usernames and previously breached passwords. So in that scenario, we had to do something about it, block the IPs and all that good stuff. So that's just something we see. And, within any 90-day windows, we could see double that amount of alarms. It could be quieter. There generally isn't a pattern, and it is strange. We try and look for patterns to show our customers. Sometimes one particular customer will be getting absolutely whacked with phishing attacks and things like that, and then it'll die down and it'll move to a customers in our other industries such as construction. So it's very it's a very fluid thing there, how that kind of works. Sorry, I'll just get a drink of water. So when we talk about SOC services and things like that, there's a lot of buzzwords. It's a bit buzzword bingo out there, and it can be quite confusing even for us, as security experts, and it can be very confusing for buyers, for IT managers, non-IT people, leaders, CTOs, people like that, because it's constantly changing. And as a security industry, we've got to hold our hands up and say sometimes we're guilty of this, on the marketing and the sales side. So I'll blame Damien on this one. We coin new terminology and things like that, just to sound cool. But what you can see there on the screen are some of the main ones: EDR, XDR, SIEM, SOAR, and all that good stuff. And I'll go through these now and go what they are. And this has hit us in the past. Damien and I went to a manufacturer automobile up in in the north, and he'd been told by his parent company over in the Far East, you need to get a 24/7 SOC. These are our compliance requirements. So we sat down with them, scoped it all out, and we said, look, okay, 24/7 monitoring your Microsoft environment, your servers, yes, all that good stuff. And then we said, do you want endpoint detection and response and endpoint, security? And the head of IT there said, no, we've just renewed, I think it was Carbon Black or something like that. We've just renewed that, we're okay there. So it was fine. Left it, had a catch-up call, and he, came back to us and said, oh, you were well more expensive than the other vendors that we went out to. And we said, because usually we're not, we're either on parity or usually a little bit cheaper. And we said, that doesn't seem right. What have you gone for? And unfortunately, he'd gone somewhere else. And he said, oh, I bought this solution, and showed it us. And all it was a managed EDR. And not one of the well-known ones. And we said, well, that doesn't do everything. And he said, well, it ticks the box of a 24/7 SOC. And then he said, I'm not really bothered. It ticks that box, which was obviously quite frustrating from our perspective. But there was a bit of confusion there, on that side. And it's things that we learn from there. So not all of these services are created equal, as I'll move on to. but I'll just drop through into a few of them. So the first one, EDR, endpoint detection and response. So this really is an evolution on your traditional antivirus, and businesses and professional organizations now should have EDR next to their regular anti-malware and antivirus solutions. Now most vendors, and here we're talking CrowdStrike, Microsoft Defender P2, SentinelOne, organizations like that, the antivirus will come as part of it, but the endpoint detection and response is being able to isolate that device, to run actions, to connect to a device in the background and run different queries. And EDRs will use things like real-time behavioral analysis, so chaining things together, to have a look for those threats, malwareless attacks. A lot are using AI, machine learning, and things like that now. And because this is a bit more of an advanced capability, traditional IT admins and things like that might not have the skills or the time to deal with the output of EDRs, and that's where the managed bit, the MDR, kind of came from. And then, because we love an acronym in our industry, there was it was bad for this about 2 years ago, the DR craze, so EDR, XDR, NDR, all kinds of things like that, and it was just being bandied about, like crazy. But XDR is extended detection and response, and I know extended doesn't begin with an X, but if you throw an X into your product, it sounds a bit cooler. But what this aimed to do was take that EDR a bit further and then integrate via API or something like that with other solutions, such as your firewalls, your cloud security, your cloud environments, things like that, to be able to pull different bits of data from different places. So for example, some of the XDR functionality we do is we're quite a big Cisco security house on the network side. So integrating that with Cisco firewalls, to then we detect something on the endpoint from the endpoint EDR, and then can we block an IP on the firewall and do that in rapid time there. So that's what an XDR is. Then going back many years, SOCs have had SIEMs, security information and event management. Now this, and as I'm going through this, you might think, oh, that overlaps a bit with the previous thing. And you're right, that is right. A lot of this stuff does overlap, and this is why it's so confusing. But a SIEM will collect data from across your whole organization. Usually SIEMs are like syslog or Windows logs, NX log, things like that. So it'll be getting tons and tons and tons of data, and I'll show you what that looks like later. And then there will be threat intelligence and correlation rules to look for threats and things like that inside there. Now, where this will differ from an XDR is that all of that data, masses of data, millions and millions of events, that's often required for compliance. So, if you're PCI, the payment card industry, if you're a certain level of PCI, you need to have that data, the warm logs ready for 90 days, ready to action them. So that's one element. Also, we were working with a customer recently who, went to an MDR provider and said, they were breached through the network, and it was through a network device. We need you to look after us. They didn't put this in, they put an XDR in that wasn't getting them logs. So now we've spoke to them and he said, well, that's the thing that we needed, was those logs and trace back through there. So that's what a SIEM does. Then you have a SOAR, security orchestration and response. And kind of, an XDR might do this, but have SOAR capabilities and things like that. But that's, that will integrate with your tools, and then you'll be able to set up automation workflows. So, if we see this, a login, a suspicious Microsoft login, then block that account, lock it out, and do all this. If we see a threat, for example, on the endpoint that is, more than 50% confirmed ransomware, automatically isolate that device. That's the orchestration and response flows, that we can see from there. And then, you know, the last one is managed detection and response. And that does pretty much exactly what it says on the tin. So, you know, it's taking the EDR and all that good stuff, and it's managing it, because dealing with this stuff now, you know, it's a burdensome task. As I said before, you know, tuning that data and tuning the noise out is a big job. We know better than anyone, as me and Damien, as business owners, how much cybersecurity staff cost us, you know, and they're in demand, you know, they always want, you know, a raise and all that. This stuff's not cheap. Some of these systems aren't cheap. So to do this in-house, it can often, you know, cost a lot, but you might need to rely on a partner for that. But not all MDR services are created equally, which I'll move on to shortly. So the business cases for a SOC then, so you know, you might be building a SOC internally. If you're a big corporation, that probably will be the case. But you know, I've worked, you know, I'm ex-military, worked in the defense sector, and then I've worked for larger corporations, you know, in media and manufacturing, and there SOCs were commonplace, you know, especially as you think in the defense sector, you know, and the risks there. But one of the reasons we started Protos is we saw early on that some of that stuff that we did in the defense sector and that was becoming more and more commonplace for small to mid-sized enterprises, and that's where we play. That's what we aim to do, is bring that stuff and get ahead of the curve. And we're seeing SOC services now becoming more and more commodity, you know, that 24/7 monitoring and things like that. And we're now seeing cyber insurance say, if you've got this, your cyber insurance premiums will come down if you've got that 24/7 monitoring. And it's providing that, you know, 365 days a year, you know, someone is there monitoring it. And, you know, we know that the IT team and the rest of the organization is not, you know, you might work 9 till 5, Monday to Friday, but your systems are operational 24/7. So what if something happens at 2 in the morning on a Saturday morning? You know, the attackers, if they're into your systems, got 48 hours before anything's noticed, even longer. You know, if you're not monitoring your anti-malware, or things aren't even being monitored. And that obviously has an impact, you know, and building a SOC will minimize downtime. As you saw in those cases we saw, you know, it prevented, you know, bringing down a whole manufacturing line that's producing, you know, hundreds of thousands of pounds of products every day. You know, that, you know, a big financial loss there. Reputational damage is a big one. And, you know, thinking about this stuff, now as boards are becoming more and more accountable for this stuff, especially to shareholders and people like that, they're passing this down and they're giving IT managers the budget and say, go and get 24/7 cover. But it can also be driven by regulatory compliance. One of our earliest SOC customers, it was driven by ISO 27001. They have got a government contract, and that government department said, no, the levels of data you're working with, you have to have a 24/7 monitoring solution and instant response. So it was driven by that. Also, the newer version, the 2022 standard of ISO 27001, threat intelligence is now a new thing, and you know, we bring in threat intelligence to, you know, to the service as part of that, so it helps meet that. Having a SOC also helps you keep ahead of cybersecurity trends. For example, this week there's a critical vulnerability in VMware ESXi. We sent out a SOC bulletin, you know, and we know what that looks like, and there will be correlation rules detected to try and detect it and things like that. So it's keeping ahead of that stuff, and the SOC, you know, preparing you and letting you know, and, you know, advising you on new tools and things like that. Now, when you outsource that can be, you know, significant cost savings as well. You don't have to take on 3 security analysts, you know, with 35, 45, 60, 70 grand a year. You know, this can build up, and then invested in the systems, you know, could be thousands of pounds a month and things like that. We, you know, outsourcing it aims to bring that in at an affordable level, you know, for organizations. But when, as I said earlier, not all SOC services or MDR services are built the same. And you need to be very careful of what you're doing. So that, you know, customer I was speaking to, you know, recently, they said, oh, our SOC provider monitors it all. And then we were doing a bit of an audit. We had a look, and they just did an EDR, so their endpoints, and a bit of email filtering. They weren't monitoring Microsoft 365, which was biggest risk area. So what is the scope of that MDR service? What actually is being monitored? Microsoft 365 is the big one. It's the biggest attack vector we're seeing. If you're not monitoring that, you have to ask, is this really worth the money I'm spending? Does that provider, give you 24/7 detection and response coverage? In the early days, some of our customers just wanted that 8x5 stuff, and we've rapidly, we won't offer that. The reason is our SOC is 24/7, and if we see alerts in our systems, we're not gonna, my guys just aren't gonna let that pass. So we're like, no, we 24/7 is what you need now. Is there an incident response retainer? So in the small print with some providers, incident responses are separate. So you might pay £1,000 an hour for incident response, what's included there. How's the SOC resourced? All those skills I showed before. You can run a SOC quite lean, yet still get that coverage by doing things like automation. We're looking at AI now, and CrowdStrike have got a new AI thing that is your security analyst. So it goes and triages the alarm and then gives you a report and says, this is what we think. And then one of our team just has to go, I agree with that, or I don't agree with that, and it'll triage the alarm. That could potentially save on 2 members of staff. But likewise, you could cross-train your staff. So some of my security team are previous network security engineers, so they've got those firewall skills. So how do you do that? Compliance and security is an enormous one. So we base our SOC in the UK. We don't outsource it overseas, and the reason for that is some of our customers are, some of the stuff they do, it needs to be in the UK or the EU for things like GDPR and things like that. And how secure is the SOC? So, we've done a lot of work on this. Our SOC is ISO 27001, IASME level 2, it's Cyber Essentials Plus certified, and we've risk assessed and secured our SOC service down. And also then, what's the pricing model? And again, a bit Wild West, how's this priced? Some is done on log storage, and part of ours is done on that. Some is done per endpoint, per user. So, understanding the pricing model there and what's covered is key, because you might buy something cheap and you might find that it's not covering a lot. Likewise, we've seen customers spending hundreds of thousands of pounds and actually they're not getting much bang for their buck there. So it's understanding how that's priced and making sure, you're comparing apples for apples when you're looking at this stuff. So about 5 minutes left, and I'll throw it over. We'll jump into a demo and questions. So I'll go quite quickly through this. How do we approach it then? One sec, sorry. So Protos, we identified quite early on that our MDR service. Now you also have MXDR and things like that. Now I won't throw them in the bin. That it's annoying. All of those terminology. It's just marketing departments. Our managed detection and response service, we want this to cover as much as it can for our clients. So we can integrate our service with SaaS applications, and this is things like Jira, Microsoft 365, Salesforce, and then your SaaS security stack like CrowdStrike or Cisco Umbrella and things like that. But then your infrastructure as a service, Azure, Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud Platform. We've got one customer who's got all three of them, so you can imagine how much of a, an administrative headache that can be. But, they've got multi-cloud across 3 countries and, they need to keep an eye on all that stuff. But then if you've got your on-premise hardware, a lot of organizations now are starting to move stuff back on-prem. That's something we've seen. And that could be, your VMware, your ESXi, Hyper-V, but then your traditional network stuff, such as Fortinet, Cisco, Palo Alto firewalls and things like that. We want to monitor endpoints. So this isn't necessarily EDR, that can be a bolt-on, but deploying an endpoint agent out, that's monitoring Windows logs wherever people are. And then identity, because that's a big one. Active Directory, Entra ID, G Suite, and then things like, single sign-on solutions such as Duo and Okta and things like that. We want to be monitoring those identity activities, suspicious logins, unusual travel, things like that. We pull all of this, so the internet, into our core system. Now, I'll move on to this in a moment, but you know, for most of our customers, it doesn't actually matter what tool we use. But we use something called Level Blue USM Anywhere. Those of you who've been around around the industry, it used to be Alien Vault. AT&T bought it. It's now been spun off. AT&T still own part of it, but there's a lot of capital investment going into it, and I'm quite excited. And we chose this product, this solution. You know, I took a good year, 18 months, looking at different solutions. And we chose this one because it plays where we play in the small to mid-size enterprise. You know, anywhere from our smallest full SOC customers about 80 users, all the way up to a couple of thousand. You know, that's where we play. We've got partner companies, and my friend's company, he's got a solution there that won't entertain anything less than 10,000 endpoints. And he's lost deals of 8,000 because of this. So there's different solutions in different places. But the reason we like this is it can pull in all of these things. It's got number of integrations. So we'll be pulling in that data and telemetry. So it's got SIEM functionality, like we said, so syslog from all of that good stuff. But it'll be pulling in logs from Microsoft XDR, for example, via JSON script. It will be pulling in firewall logs. It'll be pulling in logins through Entra ID and all that stuff. And it'll be using all of that data through correlation rules and looking for common patterns we can configure ourselves, but also the threat intelligence. So we've got our own internal threat intelligence. It's in its infancy. We're not your CrowdStrike or your Cisco's of the world, but we do a bit. We contribute to the community. But we got Level Blue Labs, the Open Threat Exchange, the world's largest open source threat intelligence community. Cisco, Talos, CrowdStrike. These organizations, we pull that threat intel in. From there, we can get we get detections, and then we can take the necessary response actions on there. So there's orchestration and response built in. So as you can see, it's all of those buzzwords there: XDR, SIEM, SOAR. It's all built into one platform. The key and the real big point for us is our team. They're there 24/7. They're tuning things out. They're looking for threats, and they're in collaboration with your team. For a lot of our customers, we have a Microsoft Teams chat. That's how they want us to communicate. With others, we might go to their service desk, and we iron that out for you. But we'll do your instant response planning and all that stuff. I'll move on to that shortly. But then, you can bolt on other things into this. So customers can come to us and say, actually, we need an EDR as well. And our solution is CrowdStrike, but they might want user awareness training, zero trust solutions, things like that. You can bolt it on because of what we do as an organization. We do pen testing, cyber essentials, and you can roll that into your agreement as well. So we want to be your security partner, really. Just quickly, how that kind of works. So I'm running out of time, so I'll probably skip this slide. But we have the core service, as you can see there. That's got the SOAR and all that in. That's out the box. And then you can bolt on things from us, EDR and things like that. But you might bring your own solutions to the party, on that. And Level Blue, the tool we use, it's got over 800 integrations, constantly in development. And these are the things that you can bring in. Just a few there. If you use Sentinel-1, for example, you've got Microsoft Defender P2, you can bring that and we'll integrate with that, and we will, say, well, here's what we can do with it as a SOC, but there may be limitations, or there may not be. Sentinel-1's a brilliant example because it's a great solution and it's got great integrations with our system. So, you can bring your own tools to the party there. One of the key things is we offer unlimited incident response as part of our service. And we will help you draft incident response plans in the first 30 days. We'll come and sit with your people. We'll identify an incident response team, and that can involve your head of HR and people like that. We hold common incident playbooks that we're always updating: phishing, ransomware, malware, compromised account, forensics, all of that good stuff. And then we offer an annual incident response exercise as well as part of this. And that's often good for you as an IT manager, because usually the CFO is usually on the incident response team. And they get to see, actually, what are we paying Protos for? What are they doing and things like that. So that's something, we roll into our service as well. And then everything we do in our SOC follows a framework, an incident response framework. And for those of you who might know NIST, the National Institute of Science and Technology. It's an American organization, but they've got a lot of cybersecurity frameworks from defense and, things like that. This is the gold standard pretty much in our industry for cyber incident response. And the key one there is preparation. So when we take a customer on, we don't want to just put our service in and that. We often will put things like Cyber Essentials in, or we'll sit down with them and look at their solutions, do a pen test, do an audit, and get them prepared for it. So that might be user awareness training and all that, because that's the most important part. If you get the preparation right, all of the other phases that might flow from it will not be required. So, but detection and analysis, containment, contain the threats, eradicate it, recover, and then post-incident activity. We plan for that, and we're self-critical when we do incident reports. What did we miss? What did we do here? And all of that good stuff from that perspective. So that, from all of everything we do in the SOC, that is our framework that we work towards in all of our playbooks and all of that good stuff. A little bit about us then. So 24/7 service, MDR, is active all year. I've got a highly skilled team. We've got a bit of forensics in there. Malware analysis. CrowdStrike certification, blue team, and things like that. We've got a good breadth. Instant response plans, as I've just mentioned. We look for threats, and regularly be looking at blogs and things like that, and looking for indicators of compromise. All of my team is based in the UK, and our SOC's based in Chester. It's worth saying though, we are level blue as a partner. I've got a global SOC. And we actually have instant response retention with them. So, we never have to call it really, but it's there just in case we need, if there was a mass global attack or something like that, we might need to call that in. So we've got that defense in depth there. And as I said earlier, our SOC is certified ISO 27001, C+, and IASME. And we've got our ISO internal audit coming up, which we get put through the ringer by our own internal consultant there. And kind of how it's licensed then from our perspective is it's sort of on storage initially. So we will scope this with you. You say, I'm interested in a SOC service. We'll sit down, it only takes 10 minutes, and we'll go through actually what you're looking for, what have you got, and we'll scope it. And there will be log storage, so from Level Blue. So it's native to AWS, and we can deploy the solution. We usually do them in the UK. And it's tiered anywhere from 125 gigabits of storage a month all the way up to 60 terabytes. And you get a threat intelligence subscription on that. Then you choose how much warm log storage you want. So 30 days is our standard, but 90 days is recommended for some PCI. But the logs are actually stored for the life of the service. But the warm logs are the things we can interact with, on a detection and response capability from there. And then you choose your add-on services. So obviously our 24/7 service goes on because that's the real point there, of us tuning it, monitoring and all that. But then add-ons would depend. So like CrowdStrike EDR, for example, is priced per endpoint. Some of the solutions are per user, and we tell you there. And then a 1, 3 or 5 year agreement. So that's kind of how we do it. And that's Damien sort of handles that stuff. So I haven't got long left, so I'll quickly just jump into it, just a few minutes, of a quick demonstration. I'm not going to go, too far on this because we haven't got long left. I've run over a bit, so just move that to one side. Make sure I'm in the right environment. So obviously this is a live demo, so things will probably go wrong because they always do when you're live, and they work fine beforehand. Okay, that's really good. So Damien, can you see that? Yes, you're set. So yeah, this is Level Blue. Again, most of the time customers will have read-only access to this, but this is really the tool that we use, and it shouldn't really matter what tools your SOC provider uses, because they should be monitoring as much as they can. And as you can see here, that's a wonderful dashboard, and you've seen the picture of the SOCs. We've got dashboards running all of the time. The key thing for us is what we can monitor. So getting data into here. So we deploy sensors. We've got a sensor in AWS for us. But then we deploy agents, across our estate. So across our 30 odd, machines and stuff, Linux, Windows, Mac OS, we deploy those agents that are constantly monitoring for that. So that's getting that information, from our Windows systems, Mac OS and things like that. But then we want to go and get data from wherever else. So we've got things called Blue Apps, and these are integrations that are built, and there's over 800 of these. And you can see some of the ones that we've got there, ranging from Salesforce, Cisco Meraki. We are a big Cisco house, so you can see there, Cisco Umbrella, Cisco Duo, all integrations with them, from a detection and response capability. So we're getting data. CrowdStrike is obviously our EDR. Microsoft Defender, the Defender XDR suite, Office 365 and Tenable there. They're just some of the solutions that we've got in this demo platform. However, as you can see, there's a whole heap of available apps that we can see in here. So, you can pick depending on what you've got. So, if you're a web company and you Cloudflare Enterprise, could be in there. I don't know, you might have Palo Alto firewalls, and you can see all that's in there. There's heaps and heaps and heaps of different integrations across different things. Now, if Level Blue haven't got it, what they can do is create custom apps, and we've worked on stuff with this, as you can see in here in the custom template, where we'll go away, Level Blue, and they will help us build this. So these are things that are in their infancy, and then these eventually might become formal things. So, a custom Teams app there. The Cisco Secure Email Threat Defense is one our SOC team have actually developed with Level Blue. You see other things on there, Bitwarden and all that good stuff. So all that data's pulling in, and we're getting millions of events, across all of our things. And again, I'm running out of time, but I'll just quickly through. As you can see here, Cisco Meraki, we're getting syslog in the SIEM, so you can see all of this data and things like that. But then we'll also be getting API events via the XDR capability. Office 365, the logs, files deleted, who's logged in from where, all of that stuff. So you get millions and millions and millions of events, and that's often quite good in understanding what's gone. And then they will raise alarms where we see things. So obviously, we've got nothing open at the minute. But things that have been closed, and if I go back, over the last 30 days, obviously we have people who are up to no good, our ethical hacking team and things like that. So you will see things like ransomware detection and all of that good stuff that you can see on there. So if we just pick actually, if we've got a ransomware there, malware, SharePoint, malware in SharePoint that we can see there. But CrowdStrike there, this was on my machine. This was actually, legitimate activity. But we can then select an action from there in CrowdStrike to then go and contain that host. Now, I'm not going to do that because that will obviously kick me off this webinar. But we contain the host there, and we can do that quickly. We can also automate that in some circumstances, and then go from there. But if that wasn't a malware incident via CrowdStrike, if that was, like we said, a breach 365 account, we could go into there and disable the user account from the alarm. Now, there's no user in there, but, if that was a Microsoft alarm, we'd pull that through and we disable the user account, and that would revoke all their sessions and all that good stuff. But, Defender ATP, again, we can contain a host there. We can get the forensics information off the machine. We can run a Meraki action or some Palo Alto or something like that. And that's our SOAR capabilities in there from that perspective. That's from there. And then, as we said, what we then might do is we might then go into CrowdStrike if you're a customer, or we'll go into your environment and then do the deeper stuff. So let's say we've isolated the machine, but then we look at a demo machine here where we've launched some malware on it. We can then drop into this and start doing more deeper intelligence gathering, and looking at things from there. So, for example, we could connect to this host, via a session. I don't know if the machine's still online here, but we can connect to this host and start, running commands. So, it might be, what's the IP, of this machine. We can put files on while it's, while it is isolated to do activity and all of that good stuff. But also then we can see within this threat, within this attack, what actually happened, what processes were launching what, what commands were being ran and all that good stuff. And this is the DR bit of EDR, understanding what's going on and things like that there. But it's not just CrowdStrike. This could be Sentinel-1, but it could also be your Microsoft 365 environment. Some providers will just send you an email and say, you need to go into Microsoft 365 and you need to go and do this, lock the user out, blah, 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 whatever it is. We often will have access into our customers' Microsoft 365. We might have privileged identity management and things, but we'd aim to go in, so if it's in 3 in the morning and there's a phishing attack, and clear that out. That's just one thing that we will do. And we'll talk about that with you at the initial stages of your SOC service. So I'm just under 10 o'clock, so I hope I've left enough time there for questions. So I'll shut up now, Damien, and let you tell me about what.
No, thank you very much, Darren. That was absolutely brilliant. I think a lot of people they might have a lot of stuff in place, maybe a firewall, maybe endpoint, and they're wondering, why would I need a SOC? So I think you've kind of covered that off really eloquently with a lot of detail. So yeah, thank you very much for that. I am just going to go to obviously the questions. It's quite quiet actually, in all honesty. So I think that's maybe you have done an amazing job, because there's not any questions. I don't know if anyone has got any questions. We do have a few minutes, so feel free to type them in. So we've had one about cost. So I know you kind of touched on it there, Darren. Cost does vary, and I try not to be too salesperson here, and try and keep my cards close to my chest, but it does vary. Obviously, our service includes a lot of different things, like Darren's mentioned, whether that's kind of cyber essentials, does include full incident response in the exercise as well that Darren mentioned. But generally, our smallest customer is probably paying around about £2,500, and then that scales all the way up, and that's for the full 24/7. So hopefully that kind of helps. But if you do want to know any more information, please just give us a call. Ben, thank you very much. Just clarifying that you can't think of any questions, but no, really appreciate that. So there's no more questions. I'll kind of close out. So that does bring us to the end of the webinar. Again, Darren, thank you very much for that. That was brilliant, and your expertise there was fantastic. Quick reminder, this webinar has been recorded, so will be shared with you, as well as the slides. So that'll come out a bit later today. Obviously, if you'd like to discuss anything that was covered, please feel free to reach out to myself or Faye, who will actually be following up and sending the recorded link out for you. Stay connected with us, quite active on LinkedIn, and we run a lot of these webinars and events. Dan's kindly put the next couple there. First one is all about keeping children safe in education, and how to utilise content filtering and reporting to kind of cover those. We are seeing that transferable, not just in the education space. So when it comes to safeguarding and safeguarding of individuals, we're seeing that actually starting to traverse a number of sectors and industries now. And then finally, our Hack Green Nuclear Bunker cyber event, which we're all really, really excited about. It's going to be a day of speakers, peer-to-peer learning, and some lunch as well. So we'll send some more information about that. That'll be an in-person event. If you are keen or excited about that, or would like to join us, please feel free to get in touch. That just leaves me to say thank you, and thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.